The new Dark Magician support has everyone within not only the DM community, but a lot of players across the game that are gasping at the opportunity to start seeing how these support cards work within not only Dark Magician, but other variants as well. In this video, I'll be going over my initial reaction to the cards as well as a few different applications they could be used in to shed some light as to how I think we could utilize these cards in the future. Note that these were announced almost 24 hours before making this video, which doesn't give a lot of time and opportunity for players to really grasp the most optimal lines of play. But it goes without saying that I couldn't help myself, so I wanted to share some interesting interactions these do for Dark Magician and the deck specifically. Of course, I'm one of the last people on earth to make a video about these new support cards. It feels like everyone has already made one and have shared their opinions, so I won't go into every single card and what the cards do. However, I do want to emphasize and hone the idea that a lot of players maybe aren't disappointed, but a little bit underwhelmed with what the support has to offer. Now, we did get 3 new cards and each one has different applications. The Timaeus Fusion Dragon I think is the worst out of the 3, and I personally don't see it being played at all across any variant of Dark Magician. I don't think it's a good card in the slightest. I think it's more of a gimmick. However, the other 2, the Spell and the Pseudo Link 1 Fusion Monster, I think are genuinely fantastic for Dark Magician and what it wants to do. Now, obviously, these 2 cards don't solve the issues that pure Dark Magician have, but what it does do is it allows the already streamlined versions of Dark Magician to be even more streamlined, even more consistent. And what this offers Dark Magician the ability to do is it opens up a lot of deck space and a lot of deck opportunity, which can propel it further and into a better position into not only this format, but the next format, and so on and so forth. Now, in my previous videos, you'll notice that I always play Dark Magician in its most streamlined way. What can I do to maximize the most out of the Dark Magician cards? So I've been playing copies like 3 Soul Servants, 1 Secrets without playing the Dark Magician Triangle. And although that still may be the case, but I'd go and argue as these new cards allow us to streamline that down even further. Now, a lot of pure lovers of Dark Magician aren't going to like to hear that. However, it is the case when it comes to this new support. I am a firm believer that this is not it. I am a firm believer that we are getting more support, and although I think, and because of that, I think this video is going to be unbelievably premature. I think a lot of my opinions I'm going to be saying in this video are going to drastically change as the new support comes out, which is a huge disclaimer. Like most of my videos, the first combo I do want to start off with is standard Magician's Rod and Magician's Souls. What these 2 offer now is significantly more layered than what we already had before, despite it being pretty solid. But what we can do is we can start off by activating Magician's Souls. Magician's Souls will send your Palladium Oracle Mahad to the graveyard to summon Magician's Souls. Now, disclaimer is that Mahad can be any one of the other bricks. I prefer to utilize Mana and or Mahad in these situations. However, as testing goes on further and further, I can see Dark Magician Girl returning into the conversation. We then want to normal summon our copy of Magician's Rod. Magician's Rod will search us our Soul Servant. Now what we can do is we can link off Magician's Rod into our Blue Eyes Link 1, Spirit with Eyes of Blue. And what Spirit with Eyes of Blue will allow us to do is search our copy of Mausoleum of White. We can then activate Mausoleum of White, and Mausoleum of White will target either Magician's Souls and or the Spirit with Eyes of Blue to send Dark Magician to the graveyard. Now, the really interesting thing here is we have 2 draws, but we will utilize the Soul Servant we grabbed off Magician's Rod. Magician's Souls will send Mausoleum of White to the graveyard. We will chain our copy of Soul Servant, stacking our Apprentice Illusion Magician. In this situation, what we can do is we can stack our Illusion of Chaos, but to streamline this combo as clean as possible, we want to just assume that we don't have access to it, or whatever the case is. Soul Servant will stack our copy of Apprentice Illusion Magician, and then we will draw it off the effect of Magician's Souls. Because we are now locked into dragons, Magician's Souls will link itself off into another Spirit with Eyes of Blue, and we link both of these off into your Heraldic Seals. Now with Hieratic Seals on the board, there are a few interesting avenues we can do. We do have the draw 2 off Soul Servant in the graveyard off Magicians and Dark Magician and Mahad. However, we could utilize that at the very end after we thin out our deck. We will activate Apprentice Illusion Magician, discarding a random blank to special summon itself, and Apprentice Illusion Magician will search us our copy of Dark Magician. Now, what is Apprentice Illusion Magician? Now that we're no longer locked into dragons, Apprentice can tribute itself to meet the clause to summon Magician, a Dark Magician, the Magician of Destruction, or whatever you call it. I don't even know what the official name is yet. We then activate this card. So we banish Apprentice Illusion Magician to summon out our Magician of Destruction. We then activate Magician of Destruction's effect to grab our copy of Secrets of Dark Magic from our deck to our hand. Here, what we can do is we can then banish Soul Servant from our graveyard because we have Dark Magician on field and in the graveyard, or 2 Dark Magicians in the graveyard and 1 Palladium monster. We can draw 2 cards, and we pretty much end with 6 cards in hand, with essentially Seals and the new Dark Magician. Now, we did search Secrets instead of the new Timaeus card, and there is a reason for that, and I'll explain why later on. Is because I think Secrets in this situation can give us a little bit more, whereas this new Timaeus card just gives us access to Dragoon, which is still solid, but I think both can be used and both have different applications. When going first, I think Secrets of Dark Magic to be used as an interruption is going to be very, very effective. So once we're in this position, essentially, we will set our copy of Secrets of Dark Magic and pass turn to our opponent. Passing turn to our opponent here, what we have is we have a Hieratic Seals bounce, which will bounce a card back to our opponent's hand, allowing us to summon Fallen of Albaz from our deck. If our opponent is playing a light or dark deck, Fallen of Albaz can fuse with one of our opponent's monsters by discarding a card, essentially fusing itself with our opponent's monsters to summon one of Lubellion, Albion, and or Sanctifier if they're playing a light target. We can go into the Sanctifier line where we lock our opponent out by giving them a Spirit with Eyes of Blue. And essentially what this does is if we go into this line, we essentially shuffle back or banish Mahad with Fallen of Albaz to summon Sanctifier, giving them a Spirit with Eyes of Blue. And what this does is it locks them into only dragons. However, if we don't want to go down that route and we want to play a more Dark Magician heavy style of play, the Albion and or Lubellion can go in and make a copy of Rise Dark Dragoon, because we have, this is a Dark Magician. We have the Dark Magician in hand and or engraved, which means we don't really lose value to Soul Servant going forward as well with this line, which is really, really strong. So in this example, I will theoretically summon Red Eyes Dark Dragoon with the Fallen of Albaz line. And after Red Eyes Dark Dragoon utilizes its negate. So if this is our game state, we had Lubellion and Lubellion shuffled back our Dark Magician and Fallen of Albaz. This is our game state here. We have a Red Eyes Dark Dragoon negate, which we could burn a card for that. But the amazing thing here is now we could utilize Secrets of Dark Magic. We use Secrets of Dark Magic instead of the new Timaeus card because we can do a really interesting line of play where we fuse Dark Magicians and the Lubellion to pop 2 monsters on our opponent's side of the field and draw 1 card when we summon a card like Guardian Chimera, which is really, really strong as well. So what we have here is essentially we have a disruption off a Seals bounce, summoning Fallen of Albaz, fusing away with our opponent's monsters, summoning Rise Dark Dragoon as an Omni negate, Guardian Chimera with a draw 1 pop 2 or a draw 2 pop 1 depending on what you used in hand, with 3 remaining cards in hand, and a loaded graveyard with a lot of different plays. If we say top deck the Illusion of Chaos, or another way access to Soul Servant, or even if we drew into the new Timaeus card on our opponent's turn or on our next turn, we could just summon it, shuffling back our Dark Magician and summoning another Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, or progressing our gameplay that way, which is really interesting. And that's all off Magician's Souls and Magician's Rod. And that's what I mean when these new support cards, they add a bunch of layers to the Dark Magician engine that's already been pretty good. Because we're all on the Primite hype train right now, Ether Barrel is also very, very good when it comes in combination with the new Dark Magician support cards. Whether or not this combo is better than just setting up the Drill Beam loop, I'm not sure yet, but it is something interesting that we can utilize. We start by normal summoning Ether Barrel Dragon, and Ether Barrel will set our copy of Primite Lordy Load. Lordy Low will activate to grab our copy of Primite Roar, which is really important in this situation. I normally don't play Primite Roar, but getting access to Dark Magician is very important. What we can then do is utilize our Primite Ether Barrel by activating its effect, sending it to the graveyard to send Dark Magician to the graveyard as well. We can then activate Primite Roar to special summon our Dark Magician from our deck, which is really good. And then we could banish our 1 copy of Dark Magician to summon the Magician of Destruction. We can activate the Magician of Destruction's effect to grab our new Timaeus card from our deck and add it to our hand. Now what we can do is we can activate Primite Lordy Load, calling Dark Magician to summoning it back from the graveyard. If our opponent has a Bestial, we can dodge this by utilizing the Timaeus Dragon and shuffling back our Dark Magician, which is pretty awesome in this situation. But with this being said, we can link off our Dark Magician into a copy of Imduk, and then we can link off both Imduk and the new Magician of Destruction into an IP Masquerena. We then set our new Timaeus spell and pass turn to our opponent with 4 cards in hand. Now, is this better than the Drill Beam cards when we can utilize Drill Beam and constantly recycle Drill Beam? Potentially yes and no, but the best thing about this is that Drill Beam can be live next turn when our Ether Barrel adds itself back to our hand in the standby phase. Going into our opponent's turn, what we have here is actually a very interesting combination of plays. We start off by activating our Timaeus, the United Dragon, Timaeus spell card that shuffles back our Dark Magician. Because the new Dark Magician is treated as Dark Magician in the graveyard, we can then shuffle it back into our extra deck to summon our Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. Now, if Dragoon does utilizes negate, it is a sitting duck. So in this example, we'll utilize Dragoon's negate by discarding a card, negating an effect, and destroying that card. Now that Dragoon is utilized and wasted, it's sitting on the board, not really doing anything. So what we can do is utilize IP Masquerena by activating IP Masquerena's effect, linking it off with Dragoon to summon a card like SP Little Knight. And SP Little Knight essentially will on-summon banish a card and provide a further disruption. Now remember, we did all this with 4 cards in hand, which means if we had more extension, we could layer this even further. But off of 1 Ether Barrel Dragon, we were able to set up a Dragoon negate, an SP banish, and potentially another SP banish if our opponent does choose to interact with our board. So off 1 card, we turned it into 3 interruptions, which is pretty solid in its own right. And it's something that I think the new DM support helps tremendously when thinking about new ways to play Dark Magician. My biggest concern when first reading these cards is I immediately thought, damn, these are so unbelievably splashable in other engines, and nothing reigns more true than the Wanted engine and the Dia Bellstar package. However, that being said, what this allows us to do is it allows us to take this engine and make it significantly better for ourselves. Sure, a lot of decks can just utilize Wanted and end on a Dragoon on their own. However, what we can do is, because we have access to Magician's Souls, Magician's Rod, we can end on a little bit more depending on what we open. But Wanted with 4 cards in hand, in a very streamlined way of thinking about it, ends you on a pretty decent amount of interruptions, all playing under 5 summons, which is important. So what we can do is we could utilize by in draw phase activating Wanted Seeker of Sinful Spoils to grab us our copy of Dia Bellstar. What this also does is it plays around Droll unbelievably well, which is very, very important. What we can then do is we could utilize Dia Bellstar by summoning it by discarding a card from our hand to summon it to a field and activating Dia Bellstar's effect. Dia Bellstar will activate our Deception. Deception does grab us access to the Hallowed Azamina. We will reveal our Sylvia. Apologies for the pronunciation. Sending our Deception to summon our Sylva, or however you say the card's name. My apologies. We can then utilize Dia Bellstar the Black Witch by banishing it to allow us to go into our copy of Magician of Destruction, which will then activate its effect, grabbing us our Soul Servant. Why is grabbing Soul Servant so important? Wanted, the Seeker of Sinful Spoils, can banish itself to target either one of these 2, put them to the bottom of the deck, and what we can do is chain Soul Servant to that, allowing us to stack our new copy of Timaeus to the top of our deck, and we will draw 1 card. Now, the cool thing this is Soul Servant can banish itself if we have nothing left in hand to essentially draw another card from the top of our deck, allowing us to replenish back to the original 5 we had, and we can set our Timaeus and pass turn. So we have 4 cards in hand, and now this doesn't seem like a lot, but Timaeus can activate its effect, shuffling back the Dark Magician, the new Dark Magician, to summon out the Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. Now, the reason for this is that we don't want our Dragoon to be banished at the end of our opponent's turn. We want to be utilizing it as a body on our turn, so we can utilize the new Timaeus card to activate it on our opponent's turn, allowing us to help and keep our Dragoon live for our turn on the follow-up. Now remember, we started off with 5 cards in hand, and Wanted alone gave us 2 interruptions, one being a Dragoon and one being Sylvia, or however you say it. Apologies for the pronunciation. Despite that, is Wanted allowed us to access the Dark Magician engine and the best parts of the Dark Magician engine significantly better than a lot of what our other cards allowed us to do, and that is all because of this new Magician of Destruction. And essentially, I do understand the problem that this being a little bit splashable in other engines can be a problem. However, if the 4 other cards in our hand allow us to layer this end board with more things, and yes, potentially other decks can layer it with better things. But for example, if we had a Magician Souls, we send our Marauder Dark Magician Girl as well to give more value to Soul Servant. If we had, for example, already opened this, we haven't normal summoned yet, so Soul Servant can stack our Magician's Rod, which is another free body, which can go into our Hieratic Seals line, which can layer this end board even further, which is also really awesome in that regard. So that's just this is how I think the deck will be played if this is all we get. I don't anticipate this is all it's going to be. I think we're going to get more support. However, if this is all we do get, I think the Wanted engine with the Azamina stuff paired with Dark Magician is going to be the way to play, because it gives us a lot of amazing access and avenues to this new Fusion Pseudo Link 1 and the Timaeus spell, allowing them to be online easier, allowing us to get to our best end boards a lot better. Like I said at the start of the video, I do think that there is more to come. I don't think that this is it, and because of that, I'm not even going to begin to theorize and begin to start crafting a list with you by utilizing these new options and these new support cards. What I will say though is that I am going to remain very positive about them. I know there have been a lot of negative comments in regards to these new support cards. However, I do think that they push the deck in a positive direction, depending on what lens you look through it as. If you are looking through it as, do these cards help pure Dark Magician? No, I don't think they help pure Dark Magician. But what I will say is that they help do what Dark Magician does well, and it helps it do it significantly better, which allows for more creative and optimal deck building going forward. And to round off this video, I do want to say that when it is a more optimal, when you are building a more optimal deck list, it allows for other Dark Magician cards to shine in different ways. I think there are going to be more utilization for Bond Between Teacher and Students, for the Dark Magician Triangle, which might not see play and maybe will see play, who knows. But what it does do is it puts less weight on those cards, because what these new cards do help Dark Magician with is it helps with what the deck is already really good at, and that's establishing a very strong boss monster. So thank you so much for watching. I can't wait to see what the new support is, and as the day goes on, you can for sure bet on me to continue looking into these cards and finding new opportunities and new ways to play them, because that's what I'm so excited for. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an amazing day. Bye.